Hello and welcome to Conversations in Close Protection with your hosts Chuck Randolph and Chris Story. Our goal is to engage the greater protection community, inspire innovative thought, and as always, continue the conversation around all things close protection. Let's see what the guys are talking about this time.
Good morning and welcome to Conversations in Close Protection. My name is Chuck Randolph. Across the digital divide, as always, the empirical Mr. Chris Story.
Oh, finally, I don't have to. Something I don't have to look up too much.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
You're looking empirical with your glasses.
I always look empirical. And now, in order for me to look for anything, I need my glasses.
Yeah, I know. It is what it is, my friend. It is what it is.
Yep.
How do we find you on this almost just after BMNT morning?
Charged, pretty good, empirical, ready to hit the day. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Same. Happy. It's a weekend as we record this. Happy for the weekend to be here. I'm not really sure what that means anymore. Quick shout out to all of our friends and practitioners and people that are either in Texas or on their way to Texas or who are already there and either dealing with the issue or looking to help people that are in need.
Yeah, the dumpster fire continues.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Texas, right? I know there's a lot of folks, everybody's like, hey, you guys weren't ready for it, blah, blah, blah. Well, Northern California would be ready. Southern California wouldn't. I mean, that's called climate, right? But I think a lot of people are thankful that they made preparations from COVID that, transition. And I think if anything, it's just going to tell us that with the rocky environment that we're facing and the unknowns and all of the pressures that are still here, being prepared, it helps us be resilient.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where in one sense you can say, who knew? Or who to, as my grandfather used to say, who to thunk it?
Right.
But, the realities of 2020 keep coming into 2021. And you're right. I mean,
right.
Preparedness is not just for people who seem to be extreme. I mean, it's for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I think what is happening is it's going to kind of push us all away or most of us away from taking things for granted, right? You go, hey, I'm just going to go on a quick 2-hour trip to go X, Y, and Z. And now you're starting to realize like, yeah, that might need a little bit more planning to be involved in that, like wherever it is, climate change, narrow roads, ice, whatever. I mean, you got people that are having to thaw snow, for water. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that makes the whole idea of a go bag as well, which, for people's cars, just the idea, like one of our favorite listeners to the show, she's got a little go bag in her car.
Mm-hmm.
She knows what the deal is, and it doesn't always mean it needs to have a sawed-off shotgun and
right.
a Tonfa and ninja throwing stars, but just taking time to consider the options that you might face.
Yeah, and I think that's, to be honest with you, as we say it, right, that might be the issue, right? Because a soccer mom is going to hear, I need a go bag. Like, what does that even mean, right? At the end of the day, it's really just finding an old backpack or an old something to carry that there's not a bunch of stuff flopping around that you can put in, some medical stuff, some meds, some, stuff for scrapes, stuff for warmth, some stuff for light and stuff for heat. And if you can do that, and then hydration. And if you can do that, you're squared away, right? At least you can sustain yourself for 24 hours.
So I had we had a executive assistant that I used to work with, and she had a go bag in her car. She had kids, was air quotes soccer mom or soccer dad or whatever. And I remember she asked me if I had a go bag, and I was like, wow, yeah, of course. Do you have one? She's like, yeah, of course. And she was talking me through what she had.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. She had all the med stuff. She had a blanket. They had some trail mix and stuff like that. And she also had suckers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what's the suckers for? She's like, for the kids.
Yeah. Keep them quiet.
They're nervous. What's going on.
Yep.
I mean, not to sound weird or anything, it's a piece of candy they can put in their mouth that keeps them happy and keeps them occupied.
Yep.
While she's like, while I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I was like,
right.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a matter of, and I think it's important in this day of immediate gratification, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're like, well, I don't need that, right? I mean, even food. Okay,
Yep.
well, we're locked down, so that's fine. I'll just have somebody bring it to me, right?
Well, and there's the idea too, and again, we're not taking to the stream, but the idea is like, oh, it'll be fine in a couple days, something will be open. I mean, Red Crosses, they used to say 3 days, now they're saying 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah,
So.
and the power companies are telling me the same thing. Like, hey, it's going to be weeks, Yeah. And if you think about it, think about just the impact of that, and whether it's medications, how long does the food in your refrigerator last? Like, if this would have happened, if there had been, no power for days in the summertime, that would have the opposite effect, right? I mean, all your food would spoil, people would be overheating, and we see it. We see it often, and we'll likely see it again.
We ran through it in the Grand Pacific Northwest last month. In fact, you and I were trying to record and couldn't because I had no power for several days. Mm-hmm. It was just enough to where stuff in the fridge was, going to go bad. Fortunately, we always have a plan, but it's just realities of the day. I mean, I don't want to make it more or less than it is. It's just kind of reality. And if you're someone that's down there and you're getting ready to go do health and welfare checks, or this isn't Iraq or Afghan or Libya, or it's not about, oh, we're running hard, and just understand the environment you're going into as well, and prepare, and and be careful.
No, but it can be. I mean, it won't be Iraq or whatever, but it can be similar to that type of environment, especially, I mean, look at any hurricane or post-hurricane environment, right? I mean, first folks that go in are security, safety, life safety, because when Maslow's hierarchy, as the further you go down, the greater risk people take to protect them in there. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I'm not stating, hey, don't go in with a lollipop in flowers. You gotta be ready. You gotta be prepared. But also, like we've talked about many times, like understand the mission, understand what you're doing, and prepare accordingly. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Be careful. Yeah. I mean, there are some, like you said, you got to plan accordingly. There were some folks I'd spoken to that were in Texas, right? I mean, they were, I guess, temperatures got down to 30 degrees inside their house, right? So no electricity. So, literally you just have shelter, so people are, and it's not like you got snowsuits in Texas, right? They're not used to that. So they're, layers upon layers upon layers, and blankets and candles, so doing it old school.
Talked to a good friend of ours that had moved down to Texas, and she told us, thank God I kept my North Face.
Yeah.
Like the mountain North Face, not the quarter zip or something. She's like, because it was a deal. And you're a climate, we might say, well, heck, up here, I mean, it's no big deal. But, if you're acclimatized to warm weather, 40 degrees is cold, 30 degrees is frigid, 20 degrees is an issue.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it takes you a while to get used to that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, hey man, before I forget, I want to make sure I say thanks for that.
Oh yeah.
That was cool.
You're welcome.
As you know, we are both big fans of Musashi, so I was excited to get that in the mail, and figuring out where I want to put it up. It might go right up here on the wall next to us. But nice. I want to say thanks for sending that along. That was really cool, and a really cool surprise, my friend.
Yeah, man. Well, I think it was Merry Christmas, if I'm not mistaken, but it was just late. And I got one too, but I'll have to share it next time. It's over in the corner. Not that you sent me a fave.
It was perfect when I ran into that to you. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's
actually since it's show and tell. Hang on, let me get it. Hang on a second.
All right.
I just realized that yours is bigger, but anyways, which is awkward. Anyways, you can see that. I don't know if it's reflecting, the light's reflecting it, but yeah. Little me and my friend Keanu.
There we go.
John Wick. Good times.
I'm thinking I'm back. Yep,
that's right.
Nice. Oddly enough, Chris, I had sent you a text. I got a text from my uncle of all people that I haven't seen in many, many years. And he said, hey, by the way, random text. By the way, I love your John Wick podcast. That was awesome. Me
Nice.
and my cousins, we all love John Wick. That was awesome. I'm a big fan of the show and I listen all the time. So thanks, Uncle Mike.
Nice.
For the shout out.
And
it goes to show you a lot of, we have folks that listen in that are just interested in the industry and interested in the things that we're bringing, all the amazing guests. So
yeah, it's cool. Well, and I would say there are people that are inside the industry that are trying to do things as well. Like I got invited out to the range, I think it was last week or so, by Veterans Covert Protection Group. And I was like, all right, what are we doing? And they're like, we're just trying to get people out of the house, man.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty informal, was able to knock the rust off. And that was literally all they were doing. They were shaking out some of their stuff and they wanted to, they invited some people from the local area to help them shake out, but, just kind of created a little mini networking event. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. Shout out to Alan Perry and those guys. Cause that was a good time. It was a good time.
Hey, did you happen to see, I think it was sometime around the 5th, that C4 went missing at, I think it was 29 Palms. So
nope.
Yeah. So it was quietly reported. I don't know that it's a big deal or not, but well, it's a big deal. I mean, 1/10 of what went missing could decimate a car, but 10 pounds of explosive vanished from 29 Palms, and they're still investigating. I'm kind of tracking this on the side, and I haven't seen an update. If somebody is out there and they know something or you see something, please reach out to us, protectiontalk@outlook.com, and let us know. But it is, I mean, it's not the first time you've seen things disappear from military bases. Let's face it, we know how soldiers think. Sometimes they maybe don't think, but given the climate that we're in and the emotionally charged climate around that time, I thought that was pretty interesting to note.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I would say a couple of things with that. Number one, I think from a political environment, we were talking, like we're coming to this head, right? This tipping point. What is happening? And all of a sudden it just kind of dropped away. Yeah. Now, is that because it's not covered? Is that because it was misinformation? Is it disinformation? What is happening, right? I think that kind of left a lot of people going, wait a minute, what are we doing, right? Yeah. Next, I think it's just as you're talking about, like 10 pounds of C4, kind of a big deal, right? But yeah, but is how much other illicit, explosives and whatnot are smuggled into the country. Kind of have a drug problem. So I'm sure at some point I guess my point is, so we're not losing our minds. We're really focused on a 10 pounds missing from one base in the US, right? Yeah. 10 pounds, one base in the US, when likely hundreds of pounds can be smuggled in over any border.
Sure.
And I think they call that irony. I don't know.
But it's just those, like, you see those things that pop up every once in a while in your newsfeed, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, we don't get subsidized by anyone on this podcast. And I'm a big fan of Feedly, and, things pop up and you kind of go and check it out to make sure it's not misinformation. My old IO information operations hat comes on, and I was just like, that's interesting. I also saw, while I was scanning this, there was this article. Do you know what Twitch is, Chris?
Yeah, it's where you watch or post or whatever people play video games. Yeah, I mean, it's like really popular for some reason.
But and the thing is, like, I don't watch Twitch, although I've watched it a little bit since this article came out. And I guess we should post all these articles up in the show notes or something, so if people want to go look at them themselves. But this thing is like, Twitch is, you're right. People go and they play games, and your kids or your grandkids or your nephews or whatever are watching people play games.
Yeah.
It's odd, but it's just not for me, but I've seen my kids do it. Mm-hmm. And this one famous Twitch streamer, I think they're called, her name is Nico. She has a stalker who, and I'll just quote this, Nico recently opened up about her deal with an obsessive stalker who had written a 246-page blog about their make-believe relationship.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think I think she plays Animal Crossing. And, she just goes on, she plays Animal Crossing. She talks about it. And this individual, people listen to the show. They've listened to the folks we've had on talk about threat assessment and all. I mean, this is things that you normally see, but
right.
It's,
just
think about this young lady who's like, hey, I'm playing games and I have like a following and I'm getting a little famous. And now somebody has shown me this 246-page, should I say, manifesto on a make-believe relationship. And she said it made her physically ill to read it.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Right. And then this person is like, thinks it's real, and of course it's real for both of them, except for one's like really a nightmare and the other one is not. I mean, first, I think the first thing that we saw with this was the swatting piece, right? I mean, where people were, because you could watch somebody live and live stream and do whatever, and then all of a sudden you can have an impact on what's going on, right? So it's some alternate reality, if you will. And then now because it's that thing about being famous, right? Whatever being famous is, people connect with you, they're a part of your life. They start to know you, but the disconnect is that you don't know them, right? And then they create this relationship with you that they have, and the
individual in the article even says, to your point, at some point to have, quote, connected the dots towards furthering the relationship. Now, if you're a threat assessment, threat manager, you're going to read this thing, you're going to look at it and say, is this a hunter? Is this a howler? At what point do we need to understand, or what point do we need to do more? But, there's a couple things here, or as you might say, two things. One, platforms like Twitch and maybe TikTok or, things like that, that's where people are going. We had way back in the day, we had America Online. Before that, you had things like CompuServe, Prodigy, America Online. Then you had MySpace, and then you had Facebook. And now, it's the next evolution of where people are going. Okay. It's also the next evolution of where risk is going. Risk is following.
Of course.
And where there's risk, of course, there's opportunity for protectors. People, I'm not saying, hey, go out and capitalize and monetize all this, but it is, if you're looking at it from a business sense, there's opportunity here to help and do the right things and also probably get paid for it. But also the second thing is, if your family, or, stop me if you've heard this one before, you got to be careful. You got to know.
Yeah.
You got to understand the environment. If your son or your daughter or your niece or your nephew or your neighbor or your friend is like, they need to understand the realities of what that means with this disconnected, fame, if you will.
Right. And regardless of who you are, how you are, whatever you do, whatever you're doing, you're marketing and trying to connect with these people and have, all of these followers. The more exposure you get, the more risk you expose yourself to. And I think what this is going to bring for protectors is it can't be solved by you standing next to somebody. This is not a physical, it's fine, we'll just put a bodyguard in place, right? That's not that. That can help make the person feel safe. It's not might not necessarily make them more safe because there's other vectors. They still have to get their exposure in order for them to be successful and continue, just like an entertainer, right? It's just, but now there an abundantly more of them that are going to be exposed to these types of risks and threats. And so it'll be, I'm glad that we're moving the ball down the threat field so that we have to think and get out of our comfort zone of like, hey, I'm a bodyguard, I'll stand next to you with my sunglasses, earpiece, and it'll be okay because I'm a badass, to force us to think and almost embrace cyber threats from a personal protective aspect to help solve some of these problems.
Well, look, digital EP is near and dear to my heart, and you hit it absolutely on the head. I mean, your first thought is like, you're not going to run out to this young lady's house and say, I'm going to put a detail. And there might be a point if you're doing threat threat assessment, threat management, you look at it and you say, okay, this has gone to level red alert. We need to put some folks on. And, that happens all the time. But you're right. You're not going to go out with an earpiece and sunglasses and stand at this young lady's door and say, I'll prevent anything.
Right.
You can't. It's coming. It's part of, it's, I'll say threat with air quotes, but we're not saying that she's being threatened, but the risk is there. It's manifested, and you're not gonna stop it like that. You're not gonna do this.
Yeah.
But you have to understand you have to understand the digital security side of things too. That doesn't mean you need to know how to work the keyboard, but you need to understand, if you don't have someone in your
you need
database,
to know how to work the keyboard. Sorry.
Well,
you do.
And we've said it before though. If you don't have someone in your network that's cyber related, get one. LinkedIn, it's there. Find one. Have a virtual cup of coffee or something. But anyway, I thought that was really interesting, and it leads to another thing that I saw.
Hey, before we get too far off that, I mean, I'm not saying we're not saying that, or at least I'm not saying that putting somebody on her isn't a thing, right? There might be a time for that, right? I mean, that might be the stopgap. Is you put something on her as you're doing your investigation, et cetera. But we have to think beyond that, right? If I'm just the guy that's here, cool. There's a guy simply self-writing her letters. Got it. I'm good.
Yep.
No
protection. I think the old adage is it's defense in depth.
There you go.
Yeah, folks, we're not saying that you wouldn't put somebody on. I mean, look, how many celebrities in celebrity, a lot of folks are like, oh, they have protection all the time. They don't.
Mm-hmm. They have it when
they may have it at selected times. Some will have it all the time. Some may have it at selected times. Some may come with a rider that says, if I'm going to come appear at, Shea Story, and sing a song, well, you will provide me with the following, red M&Ms, Aquafina, and security from portal to portal. But a lot of times when they're home or they're doing something, they may not have it. I mean, and it's the same thing here. You have to think about the issue. You have to think about the risk. You have to figure out how you're going to solve for X, and then put those layers in place and those triggers and indicators. So now, hey, Chris, we need you to go stand at this young lady's door because something's happened.
The important piece is while these other things are happening to limit the threat and risk.
Yeah.
Okay,
cool. So, but along that same lines, I saw that, was it last week? What's the law firm? Jones Day was hacked.
Yep.
Now, and why is that important for protectors? I mean, kind of along this digital EP is they have a lot, of course there's political ramifications. They did some work maybe for former President Trump, et cetera. So, but beyond that, a lot of their clientele are, luminaries, organizations, higher ups. This is probably the third such of a hack that I've seen in the last couple of years. And I think the hacker even indicated they had over 100 gigabytes of data.
Yeah. It's interesting when you think back, when you talk about the back in the day, right, where you find a 3.5-inch disc or whatever those discs were, and they were like, hey, go get the discs that have, that are 256, right? Megabytes, or even further, 256 KB, at this point is like, maybe one document or whatever, if that, or 1 megabyte disk or whatever, but hundreds of gigs or 100, that's just volumes of information. And what we start to see is, there are two segues from that first story about the Twitch streamer. One is protection, and we'll get into that with the next headline, but this one is the digital piece, and understanding the risks that are out there, what people are putting out there, what happens to data storage. And I think where we used to see things in the government space, where most of the quote unquote information was only available to the government, if you will. Now it's now all of the information is available to everybody. It just depends what keys you bring to the table and where to find them. Right. And I think this is just going to become increasingly risky, increasingly expose, I won't say secrets, but maybe information that people don't want out there to be in the public domain. And I think that, protectors need to find a way to help support that. And that's, from my perspective, make sure that you have a modicum understanding about digital security or cybersecurity or information security, passwords, how you transfer information and what you're doing. I still see people handing thumb drives off, which is like, the STD manufacturer of the cyberspace. It's crazy.
Well, as SolarWinds, that continues to keep on giving love in a negative kind of way. I mean, I think part of the issue there was the password was like SolarWinds 1 2 3 4, and I mean that we don't just people just if it can happen to them, it can happen to you. But But if in this particular Jones Day thing, there was it's a ransomware group called the CLOP, CLOP. And they took the information. They're saying they're going to put it out on the dark web, and of course, they reached out to Vice because people want it's an underground industry that they want to make sure that they get their time in the sun and all that too. And they reached out and someone said, "Why are you doing this?" I said, "Money."
Yeah.
I mean, we recently had North Korea. was implicated in a hack, and they determined it's as much for money and it's as much to support a regime, authoritarian regime, as it is nation state stuff. So we're seeing more convergence, if you'll allow me to use that overused word, of nation state and criminal activity. But for us as protectors, understanding as you start building those risk profiles, yes, the boss is in danger when he walks from his door to the car and drives to work. Absolutely. That is a requirement. There's also these priorities we need to start looking at. But how is he being implicated in the digital space? And you might say, Chuck, that doesn't affect his physicality, and that's what I'm about. As you might say, Chris, I'm a body man. You're a security practitioner and an SME of risk. This is just one more risk we need to start thinking more about.
Right. Yeah, that we need to aspire to. Yeah. And I think, if we continue to, I think this is a part we're passionate about, right? Is if we continue to just limit ourselves to only physical risk, right? We're going to miss all of the other risk vectors that lead you to that point, right? Because I think we're getting, and likely we probably even know it, right? But in order to have physical security, you don't really need cybersecurity, right? But in order to have cybersecurity, you need physical security. And if we don't understand that, we're completely missing the boat, right? So we have to have some sort of connection to cyber to understand. I mean, here's the deal. What happens if your principal likes to have their geo on, right?
Yeah.
And they run 200 apps. How many threat vectors do those apps tell you exactly where your principal is at any given time, right? And they're just pushing, right? And they keep their microphone open, and they keep access to their photos open. They keep all these other accesses open because they're too busy to get it figured out. Who's supposed to protect them from that? And then how are you? And then everywhere you go, you can't find any leak, but there's a crowd, right? It's just, those are the basics, right?
Well, and again, we're not saying everyone needs to learn binary, but
God, nobody's saying that. No.
But we're just encouraging folks, like you say, to expand and ask, if nothing else, ask the question. Hey, the boss is about to give a speech. Where does this monitor go? It's a Bluetooth. Well, what's it connected to? You walk into a hotel room or you're doing advanced work, just pull up your phone and see what signals are coming in and ask a question. Hey, is this a hotel, is this a hotel wireless? What do we know what this is? Okay. Or ask the question, maybe if the family team or something, ask the attorneys, what do we know about information that's kept here? And even if they tell you, we can't tell you what it is, I don't want to know. I just want to know, is there anything we need to consider there? Okay, thank you.
Right.
If nothing else, it might have a second or third order effect, if you will, of having someone else, talk about that.
Yep. I mean, just even as you're talking about, I was thinking about, I know there are plenty of companies that go do events, right? Think about it. It's CES, right? And an events management team runs everything, and you come in and you're like, hey, I'm the next presenter. And they're like, great, where's your presentation? On my thumb drive. and it goes into a computer that everybody uses, and everybody's putting their, and they're like, here's my presentation, here's my presentation. But what is it putting on your thumb drive, and where does that thumb drive go, and how did the information get on it? And I hate to be banging the thumb drive bandwagon, but the reality is that the information goes both ways, right? So somebody can put something on your thumb drive from that computer, and you would never know it, right? So these are the considerations that we need to have as we work in the digital space. And for those of us who are not steeped in technology, the space is broad, vast, and replicating itself over time. I mean, it's crazy.
As part of your protective intelligence, I mean, you're looking, you should be scanning dark web stuff. That is not me saying, go get on your computer right now, get a Tor browser and get at it. Please don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
But find somebody who can, or find some education that will show you how to, or someone that can do that scan. And part of your bag of tricks, part of your electronic Rolodex is to, like, hey, just like you do TSCM. I mean, I understand the rudimentary aspects of TSCM. I've managed it many, many times. I know what to look for, but I don't run the equipment. But I know what the equipment does. I mean, same thing here. Finding that digital protection piece, whether it's an individual or if you're a solo practitioner, just who can I call?
Yeah.
Besides Ghostbusters.
I think the thing is, you're talking about that, is that as you grow and as you start to learn more, you start to learn where your limitations are, because we hear, like, oh, I can do that. Well, yeah, you can, but
should you?
But should you, right? The next piece is that, yes, most EP folks are specialists, right? You're a specialist at, physical protection of your principal. It shouldn't, I guess what we're saying is, it shouldn't stop there. As the threat environment changes and the risk environment changes, we have to expand that role. So the EP specialist also has a working knowledge of cybersecurity, working knowledge of information management, a working knowledge of medical, right? All of those other things we've got to be able to have working knowledge of, so that it connects the dots to really meet the risks that our principals are facing.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it before, this idea of priorities and requirements. It pops up as a priority, and then it just becomes another risk requirement that we need to address, because I think we are the bodyguard community, if you will. We started out as physical security specialists, and that is where our bread and butter is. But in my humble opinion, over time, we've developed an industry that is now risk management specialists.
I agree.
And that's in folks, that's where we rock and roll, because we're problem solvers. We look at risk and we figure out. And that extends to the digital space too. It's just one more problem that we have to understand and say, how do we solve for X?
I'm going to agree with you, but I'm also going to throw something at it, which is,
do it.
We really started, and I don't know who said this. I don't know if it's Will or
let's just pick somebody and give them credit.
Maybe it's Ivor. And we have so many excellent guests. Anyways, we're really threat response, right? That's really what we start out as threat response, right? We really start out as that, right? I'm here, I'll respond to anything. And what we're saying is, that's not good enough, right? That's the basic level of where you're at, is that you're going to respond to threats. Actually, the base level is react to them, right? Because response indicates that you have a plan. So we're saying, build upon that, right? Because a lot of security folks are not going to say, like, look, I'm not a physical security specialist. In some way you are, right? I mean, even physical security itself has gone from, gates, guards, guns to
gates, guards, guns, gigabytes.
To gigabytes, yes. But I'm going to say the gigabytes piece is that systems, physical security systems manager, because you have the operator manager. The manager piece that's the guy that's connecting, or gal that's connecting all the dots and making sure all the access control is, connected to the CCTV and it's all working together. The rest of the folks in the other bucket are focused on operations, right? So even that split, it's just, we got to figure out how to evolve it.
Yeah. And, I had said before, we went from that 3G environment to the 4G environment. And again, it's also just it's where the industry has evolved to. It's not a bad thing. We're not bashing anything. We're just saying this is how, as the world evolves and you have what is it? Moore's law.
Moore's law.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yep. Perhaps that's overused, but Moore's law, technology is going to advance rapidly upon technology. Our industry is doing the same thing. So
yeah.
I think it's great. And I look at all the new practitioners coming out that we've talked to and we've met, and it's amazing. I mean, I just, the level of people coming out in the industry, I just so farther along intellectually than I did back in the 90s when I got in, because back then, I mean, we were body people.
Yeah. Be fit, be, active, know martial art, shut up, sit down, fight, right? I mean, I think that's how it used to be. I think another thing you said, convergence, you said is overused. And I think, what did you say? Oh, Moore's law overused? Well, no. So I would disagree. I would say that convergence is used, but not understood. Right.
Agree.
And because I say, we put cyber and physical and they're under the same roof. Yeah. Well, that doesn't mean they work together. That just means that you realign the organization. So I think convergence might be an overused word, but under executed. And I would say Moore's law just is, right? I mean, there are things that are coming out in the commercial space right now that blow our minds, where in the government space, that's old technology, right? And so, and then you look at it, like let's look at Elon Musk and SpaceX, for example. What have we heard from NASA? What's NASA doing? Right? I mean, unless it's all secret, we've got commercial entities.
They're landing things on Mars. Boom.
Yeah. Okay.
By the way, that was so cool.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
But you understand what I'm saying? Like we're seeing more from the commercial space entities and commercial space exploration than we are by the government space.
Oh, sure. I mean, think about this. When you first started in protection, drones was something you'd see in Star Trek or something, like you never thought about. Now
it was a concept.
Now, I mean, I've seen in my back in military stuff, I've seen videos and stuff of drone swarms and things that are looking, and that's frightening. And again, like we said before, it's just one more thing you got to consider and think about. I mean, it's invigorating to think of all the things you got to do to be in risk and to run a good protection program and to think about things. You know?
Yeah. Why don't we look at everybody's probably, their minds are blown right now. Like, there's so many risk vectors in the digital space.
I've got to actually, I don't want to say his name yet because I've reached out to somebody that I'm hoping we can come on the pod that will kind of talk about digital risk, but put it in a practitioner's, put it in the practitioner's mindset.
Nice.
Yeah. So let's hope, good Brit. Let's hope he responds and will come on and talk to us, Chris.
Nice. Well, let's go back to a little bit more analog protection, or let's look at a kind of a different, like analog look at protection. We talked a little bit pre-show about an attack, and it actually is a little bit. There's a lot of technology involved in it as well, but why don't you lead off?
Was it the Sotomayor issue, or was it the Iranian?
Nah, I'm
scientist?
I'm going big with the Iranian scientist, right? So I think
go ahead.
There's two sides to it, right? It really talks about the assassination, but we always look at it as a protector's, or from a protector's lens, if you will, right? And I think that with all the threat vectors we were talking about, what we talked about previously is that if somebody's willing and committed and has enough resources to get you, they can get you, right? I mean, everybody said that. If anybody's willing to trade your life for for your targets, then it's a foregone conclusion, and you got to go mano a mano, right?
And in this case, and by the way, folks, this is not a political statement by us. I mean, it's just when you look at it and you think about the implications of an assassination. I mean, this team built like a minute by minute plan. Speaking of being meticulous, and I think they did it over a well over 8-month period where they just learned this guy in and out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's some reality of potential assailants or potential adversary that you would see.
Right. And agreeably,
And
or clearly, these are two state level adversaries.
yeah,
Focused on, taking one individual off the map, right? Or to be clear, two state level actors, one intent on removing another person's, high value asset off the map.
In this case, understanding the pattern of life that the individual had, they were able to, they smuggled weapons and everything in. I think at some point in the Sky News report that I saw, they had at times up to 12 bodyguards around the guy, and they used a remote control gun set up by the side of the road, which is, I mean, because we've seen it before with the remote, with the remote controlled bomb in the bike. So,
yeah, so a lot of these things really come to, and this isn't to Monday morning quarterback in any way, shape, or form. Really, it is to, I'm not using the disclaimer guy that you are, but the idea is if the guy had security, what did they miss, right? And if the report is, and against reporting, and if I tell you that I was with you for 24 months, that can be terrifying. But the report is 8 months with the guy. How do you miss that? And again, one side will say, hey, well, you are going to miss it because we're awesome, right? Likely, post incident, there's going to be some clues and cues, et cetera, that things were missed, and did people, usually state level security people are pretty good, right? I mean, are really good. So this is some spy versus spy stuff.
Absolutely.
The thing that really speaks to me is understanding the threat against your principal, understanding that environment, and doing all the things that you need to do to make sure that you're safe. And I know there are a lot of people that have to work within a lot of constraints, right? We can only take this one road in. That's all we got. The guy won't work for home. That's all we got. And I think that piece, the constraints that are placed on protectors, is something that we have to acknowledge, not as an excuse, but as a part of the variables,
Yeah, and in this case too, I mean, the way they went after him, and then they fired the shot, and then the weapon itself exploded after the shots were fired, and you're right. I mean, it's making sure that you're managing those basics, like have we driven the route, and again, within, like you said, a lot of people are under constraints. I might be a solo operator. I might be this, I might be that, but just those basic skills of like observation and obfuscation.
And complacency, right? I mean, I think we've all been there where whatever the level of risk, as you get to that risk baseline, you're like, oh, well, we're back to normal, right? And it's just the road we drive every day. And you put your helmet and mouthpiece in, and you go, okay, cool. Again, I'm not saying that these folks got complacent. I'm just saying that we have to fight it to make sure that, hey, maybe one of the things that we have to do is we have to pre-run the route, right? Every single day, or do multiple drives up down the route every single day because of the constraints, and identify exactly what's out there. We've got to use drones, drone footage, whatever we can to minimize the risk. And I'm not saying that these folks didn't do it. I just said it seems very, very interesting that 8 months and they were still able to, complete their mission and their target.
And as you say, Chris, I mean, this is state versus state. Iran, Israel, that allegedly Israel, issues. But I think the takeaway for practitioners is you're right. Like 8 months is a long time. What subtle indicators were missed?
Right.
What subtle indicators were missed, or as you say, complacency. I mean, and I think the cautionary tale for this also is like, maybe it's not that important to check Facebook or check Instagram or Twitter or whatever while you're in the front riding. I know many people listening are like, I don't do that, but
right.
Guarantee there's folks that have snuck something, or they're maybe not even, it's not checking Instagram, but I'm texting or I'm doing something about, where we're going next. I think something else I took from this as kind of like a second, third order thing is like, sometimes if you're fortunate enough to be on a team, you got to make sure as a team leader you place yourself where you can best direct. So you might put somebody in the front right that is just dedicated to observation and dealing with that, while you might place yourself in the rear car so you can best direct, call forward, go know what's going on. But it's, as you say, it's an analog, but it's an important analog article that is a stark reminder of why we're here.
Right. Well, and I think on the flip side of things, we're going to likely get pushback and feedback, because we really say the same thing, right? Like, if your principal isn't necessarily, you've done the threat assessment, you understand what's going on, and they're not, and their biggest risk is slipping downstairs, and you got to focus on that risk, right?
Right.
It's threat dependent. You don't need to be a ninja if your principal is, first generation and wealth, and you're really more of a concierge service than anything else, and just health and safety. I get that piece, right? But applying the appropriate protective context based on risk becomes really, really important, and it just kind of makes me circle back to whatever it was, 2015, when what was it, ISIS and everybody and their brother was going to go after some of the tech companies because they decided that they weren't going to support them anymore. And then suddenly it was like, hey, our quote unquote security team hasn't really faced a threat like this, so we need some people that have. And that's that's very telling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so in order to not get replaced, we got to understand the risks and threats, and then figure out how to deal with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads us to the next article that we found. Well, you found this one, Chris, about the attempted assassination of a Supreme Court judge.
Right. And I think this one becomes really important as we had looked at the district court judge, Esther Salas. If you remember back in 2020, I think it was a delivery worker or assassin posing as a delivery worker, and then ended up killing the judge's son and wounding her husband. And then the lawyer had taken his own life after the fact. I think, first off, it goes to show a little bit of an ingenuity and approach, right? I mean, at some point, I know at least in the 24 to maybe 90 hours later, as news catches up with facts, if you will, everybody's like, oh, it could have been an Amazon driver, UPS driver, FedEx, right? So that really, muddled the waters in the search. But more importantly, and you talked about it before in a little bit previous, is that Hunter Howler aspect. Is here's a guy, unknown, not on the radar, goes to kill a judge, right? And then, post death and the gunman suicide investigation, they found a folder with basically a target package, if you will, with U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor. I'm probably murdering her name, but it doesn't matter. We know who she is. So interestingly, and the article didn't state, but probably the guy was never even on anybody's radar for that, right?
Right.
So in protective intelligence, we look at all the things that we know and don't focus on what we don't know, and don't worry about. We actually don't even worry about that, and that is really, I get really passionate about that, because the data shows that the people that you're focused on aren't the ones that come after your principal.
Right.
Right. They're nuisances. So now we're saying as a risk or a human threat management. I think that was Will had said that.
Yep.
I only worry about the things that I can see and not what I can't. And I only worry about the things that I know from a percentage standpoint are just a nuisance, right? And that's my everyday life. And the things that can actually hurt me, I don't really focus on, because I don't know what they might be. And that, to me, that's frustrating, that protective intelligence has taken that look and that lens at it, and that most organizations, that's all they focus on is what's given to them.
Well, I think last year, or no, 2019, there was like just under 4,500 threats in inappropriate communications that came, I think, to the two judges. And that's a massive haystack, and that's find the needle in the stack of needles. But, we have the ability through software and technology to help sift through some of that. But, at the end of the day, you need that Mark I eyeball that's thinking and looking and assessing the risk, at scale.
Right. And then volume of information flow doesn't necessarily increase or doesn't dictate an increase in threat.
It
at
just
all.
is. They're not mutually exclusive. And
Right.
you see a lot of people like, oh, it's threats are up or number of incidents is up. Or is that because it's up or because we've just realized more?
Right.
People
Right.
say back in the day, we didn't have this. Well, didn't we? Or did we just not have the ability to measure it?
Right.
So it's not necessarily a bellwether that something's about to go bad.
Right. Well, and I think, as we look for metrics to justify existence, et cetera, which I hate, but that's really what metrics are used for at times.
Sure.
Is that you're like, oh, well, we dealt with 1,400 incidents over the past year. Okay, well, no, probably not. You probably dealt with 1,400 events and maybe 30 incidents, because an event is something that happens that you're just aware of, that you don't have to act on. An incident is something where security had to do something to prevent it from escalating or to reduce it, right? So if we're managing or if we're actually being honest with ourselves about what we're actually managing, that's what we would do. So if the volume of events goes up, right, there might be a correlation with incidents that we can prepare for, but they're not one and the same. So we have to really be honest with ourselves about what we're doing, how we're executing, and what that looks like. And there's a case that here an unknown entity, previously unknown, or at least as far as we know, took steps silently and tragically killed the son of a sitting judge.
Well, and I think there's as we record this, which will be on next week, but I think this Sunday that we record this, there's going to be a 60 minutes piece on this. So if it does indeed post, we can put that link in the show notes, because it's well worth watching.
I want to caveat this with saying that, like, the U.S. District Court judge likely didn't have security, right? More than likely did not at all, right? But again, if you take that off the table, we do know that the Supreme Court justices have security, right?
U.S. Marshals do a great job in managing those threats, and they're some unsung heroes of the governmental protective slice of things, for sure.
And the Capitol Police have a part of that as well. I mean, there's plenty of organizations. The question is, was this guy on their radar? And I'm thinking
someone's radar,
on anybody's radar, really. Yeah. Right. And so here's a guy who had a plot to kill a sitting Supreme Court justice, and likely we didn't know about it. That's freaking scary, Yeah.
And again, I mean, people, just because you're using a service to track social media, or you're using a service to do something technology, just because you have a piece of technology, it doesn't mean that you have a protective intelligence program. It doesn't mean you have a protective intelligence foot. There are plenty of places that have the ability to overlay tech that will assist you.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's what you're relying on, you're failing.
Yeah. I mean, we gotta look for the needles within the needles.
Yeah.
And you said it pretty well.
And you're right. And technology will help us sift through those, but you got to make sure, it's a requirement. Priorities and requirements. It's one more requirement. This is an older requirement that's been around for a while, and we know, but it's a good reminder that, as anyone that's running a good protective intelligence program, you've got to be curious. You've got to ask questions, and one of your questions needs to be, what are our blind spots?
Right.
What are we not? What should we be thinking about?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think it's interesting to compare this against the EP protection issues, protective intelligence report, where it just kind of like collates all the open source information against sitting officials for the most part. It will grab a few commercial, entities. If a CEO and or a government official had been threatened at the time, and their focus is primarily government officials, but the volume of incidents, events, and incidents, because a lot of these end up in arrests, right, or investigations. The volume of those over the past year and how it scaled toward the elections and how it was, almost all politically driven, to fill 12 pages throughout the U.S. That goes to show me that, the inverse of the commercial entities, there are a significant amount of risk events happening in the space. As we've seen that increase on the government side, it has to increase on the commercial side, specifically because the commercial space has been very, very opinionated about which way politics should go or should not go, even to the point where I think there was some suspect dabbling or meddling or whatever, censorship by some of these organizations, which cause other people who are censored to have grievance with them. So again, if you look at the small numbers of government officials and the amount of threats they receive, and the large amount of commercial CEOs and representatives of organizations and the volumes of threat those might receive, I think that protectors are going to be busy for a long, long time.
Yeah, and there's been a move also, I guess to tie it back as we think about closing this article out, to tie it back to maybe that entire risk spectrum. I mean, I know there's been some calls to like scrub judges' information from the internet best you can, which we know, it's like weeds. It's going to continue to pop up, but you got to continue to pull them. I mean, again, we think about CEOs who have an opinion, and now they might fall against a group or an individuals, and we need, as well as looking at the howlers, casting a net for the hunters, scrubbing information. I mean, the protector's job is never done. I mean, it's a concentric cycle that never ceases, and it's you just have to be vigilant, and you have to be dogged in your pursuit of risk management.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's a busy, busy world out there. And I think, we really need to focus on our ability to address all the risks and threats that face our charges. And oddly enough, those martial skills that we hold near and dear, those are the ones that we should be able to fall back on immediately, but not focus on. And I think what we see a lot in the industry is us focusing on those things. And anybody talk about anything else is freaking like, wow, that guy's a savant. No.
Well, and they're continuing. I mean, if quick scan of LinkedIn, quick scan of other social media. I mean, people are hiring. I mean, there's jobs available in EP. These are the things that are gonna these types of skills, or understanding these types of risks, are the things that will help you both get into the industry and also accelerate. There's not only jobs for entry. I mean, even in COVID, there's job. People are looking for estate folks. People are looking for protectors. And then there's also a shift. People are moving up. Where ISO is coming out with some travel security
standards.
guidelines, I think,
Okay.
standards. We know, you and I predicted, many people are predicting Q3 of this year, we're going to see more travel. People are coming online, and there's folks out there that are listening right now, hoping to get into the industry. And this is one way, dust off that resume, dust off those skill sets.
Yeah. One of the listeners, yes, you talk about the skill sets. It's funny. I mean, I was just thinking, like, look, everybody's been given almost a year-long timeout, some people with pay, in order to get skills up to speed, right? If you sat around eating bonbons or donuts on the couch and 12-ounce curls, all of that is all cool in the gang, and you can still come back, mentally exercised and deal with a lot of these threats. But if you didn't take advantage of it, it's not going to work out so well. And then you talk about
time.
Yeah, there's still time. But for your peers who have seen it and taken advantage of it, that might make it a little bit more competitive.
Yeah.
And then I had a listener reached out on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, look, I'm having a hard time finding qualified EP professionals, qualified experienced EP professionals. What can you do to help, or can you give me some guidance, because they're rare, for what I need, So there are people looking for people with skill sets, and it's not John Wick, right? It's not the John Wick level skill sets. I need well-rounded thinking, risk focused security professionals.
And, we do our best to put out the gigs that we see. I mean, we try to put them over on LinkedIn, where I think we're pretty active on LinkedIn with the Conversation Close Protection Group. You could search it, find us. And we've encouraged people, and folks will put their jobs they see up there too. There's a wonderful, Julio's a great guy that just posts everything he sees. And there's a great, wonderful group out there that just continues to say, here's, you're looking for a job, here you go.
Yep.
And, I would encourage folks out there listening that says, hey, I want to get into this. How do I get into it? Just be patient, continue to, expand your resume and be willing to go, I say have gun will travel, but I'm just thinking about the old TV show, but be prepared to move, be prepared to get involved, and it's out there and you can do it.
Yep. He's got to be patient. And everybody and their brother is going to be getting back into it here pretty quickly.
Well, I think with that, we've fired off all the tidbits from this episode of Shop Talk that we wanted to bring up. I mean, anything I'm missing, Chris, before we move to close?
I think we kind of covered a lot.
Yeah.
I think I think we've covered a lot. I think
we're always worried that will we have enough to talk about, and seemingly there's always good stuff to bring up, and there's always good guests to talk about, and there's always articles and things to help create these conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I was looking at is if there was an article talk about use of firearms in private security in European countries, and God, firearms for whatever reason just light people up from an emotional standpoint. I don't know why, but at the end of the day, it's a tool, right? And if you can't over rely on the tool. You got to be able to understand where it belongs in your toolkit, and when to apply it. And I would say you've got things twofold here, right? You've got a lot of armed practitioners in the U.S., right? No gunfights in the streets, not that I'm aware of, right? I mean, you see some unfortunate incidents, but you also see, security professionals use firearms to, deter, delay, and defend, right? Your firearm cannot be used to detect, so we don't say that, and respond. So it's a valuable tool, I would say. I would say, again, if you're like, it's kind of almost like that, do I need my education or not, right? That like, I don't need education, I was successful, right? But if you had it, could you be more successful? Could you have been successful faster? Those are individual use cases. Mm-hmm. The argument of whether you should have it or not, from my perspective, drugs are illegal. Yep, they still happen. Explosives are illegal. Yep, explosions still happen. So why would you go into an environment with tools that your adversaries don't have, right? I mean, it just levels the playing field. It's not the anchor tool, but if I'm going to go into an environment and everybody's got samurai swords and you don't have anything, that's probably not awesome. So mm-hmm. And that's always going to be a passionate, exciting thing. I never was on a detail that I was on a gun. Okay, cool. That I was armed. All right, awesome. That's great. But what are we ignoring from there? So it's an interesting concept.
It's one of those points that I think we'll never fully understand, and there'll always be people on both sides. And I think, for sure, I think when we look at it again, it's priorities and requirements. What are the requirements? What are our priorities? What are our rules of engagement? What are we allowed to work within? And you examine that. I mean, when I went through the war, I went through staff college a long time ago. I mean, one of the big things that I took away from that was just the idea of stepping back, looking at a problem and figuring out how are we going to solve the problem. Just mm-hmm. don't run, you just don't run in. How are we solving? So same thing with risk.
Yeah.
What do we have? What are we allowed to use? What do we got? What are our resources? What do we need to think about? And, it's just, you're right. It's one of those things, priorities and requirements.
There it is.
All right. This is, with that, we will move to close. This has been Conversations in Close Protection, Shop Talk. We appreciate you spending some time with us to go over these articles. And if you have some thoughts about them, you want to reach out to Chris or myself, talk about adjectives or whether we should carry a weapon or digital security or anything, you can get us at protectiontalk@outlook.com.
Doesn't Rachel say this stuff?
She does, but I feel like saying it right now anyway. So she'll say it in a much better way. But this has been Conversations in Close Protection. My name is Chuck Randolph, and of course, across the digital divide has been the empirical Mr. Chris Story. Having said that, wash your hands, mask up, watch your six, stay safe, Texas.
Good times.
You've been listening to an episode of Conversations in Close Protection. Email us at protectiontalk@outlook.com and find us on your preferred podcast platform. Please take a moment and consider rating us to help others find Conversations in Close Protection too. Look for us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and other social media spots. Conversations in Close Protection is brought to you by your hosts Chuck Randolph and Chris Story. Our engineering editor is the mighty Aaron Peck. Please remember that all opinions expressed do not represent those of any organizations or companies the hosts are affiliated with. This is Rachel saying watch your six and keep your heads down.